Ken and I close out this series with some thoughts about this volume of the Battles of the American Revolution. So we just finished playing Oriskany and Newtown, twice for each game. And at this point we have some observations we can share. So Ken, maybe you want to open up with some initial thoughts about this game?
I would say they are columns marching into enemy territory with ambush possibilities. In Oriskany, it's a strict ambush. In this, there could be an ambush depending on a chart. So you're marching into enemy territory with a column. The difference between the two, one of the main differences, Newtown is a professional army, and Oriskany is an army of militia. The Oriskany one, I don't know. That one, I don't know if there's too much of a chance on the Continental side.
Oriskany, the Continentals have a really tough row to hoe. I think there are several things that work against them. First of all, with Oriskany, it was really hard to interpret the rules for regular march.
To talk about the Herkimer march versus the regular movement march.
Okay.
These are the choices.
Yeah. When you're starting as the Continentals, you get to choose where your Oneida unit goes. So it's the unit that's on top. Does he go in the rear, in the middle, or at the front? If your intention is to use the Herkimer Relief Column March, which is 6 hexes, irrespective of terrain, you do not suffer army morale loss, but you do get a negative modifier if you're ambushed. If you designate where the Oneida goes and you're going to use that march all the way, then that's the configuration of your army at the time of the ambush. So wherever you put Oneida, that's where he's going to be. Let's say you're moving this guy 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Everyone else follows. Even though the wagon train can only move 3. Now you're constrained to this setup as you keep moving forward. So you move quickly, you don't suffer army morale, but when you get ambushed, this is the layout. So what do you have? You have 3 strength factor in the front, militia combined with Indian, meaning the first column will not suffer a negative modifier for all militia, but the rest of the columns will, because this is a column of militia. And that gives a favorable die roll modifier to the attacker.
Most wise to use the Herkimer Relief movement?
I think you're almost bound to, and here's why. Let's say the next time from here, you want to use regular movement. Now, the rule says you have to advance the full movement, right? So what does that mean? And it also says Herkimer has to be at the front. Let's do a couple of moves in regular march order so that we see how you get strung out, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great. Herkimer goes here. Next one. 1, 2, 3. The other one can't make it because you need 2 more movement factors to get on top of Herkimer. So you're stuck here. Let's put this aside. So you're here. What happens to these guys? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Can't go on top because you need 2 more movement factors. So you're stuck there. What about the wagon? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so far so good. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, these guys are all stacking up now on top. Okay, let's use regular movement again. What happens? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, look, you've got a gap.
Yeah.
1, 2,
How do you
3,
handle that?
4, 5. Let's just move all these up as much as we can. 1, 2, 3, and you need 4, 5 to get there. So these end up here. And now the wagon train. 1, 2, 3. So the wagon train is still with the column, but now you've got a gap between Herkimer and everyone else. The rules do not explain how you're supposed to address this position.
No.
Okay? But it gets even worse because let's say you decide, okay, Herkimer and the Oneida cannot go that far. So in order to keep them all in sequence, you move this guy back. Great. What happens next time? Let's do it one more time, okay? This is your next turn using regular march. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can't make it down to that hex. What about these guys? 1, 2,
Not only that,
3.
you're losing every time you're doing it.
Yeah.
Killing
1,
yourself.
2, 3, 4. That's as far as they can make it.
Do you think they could ever fight their way up to the front? In any side kind of scenario, fight their way to, Seneca Camp.
Yeah, I think it's very tough. So let me just show you now where we're at. Now the wagon train's behind. The wagon train, or the supply wagon, cannot keep up. That means everyone else has to back up. Well, that's the question. Yeah. Does everyone have to back up? Or do you have to do it like this? The rules are not clear. Do you keep your column formation, or do you string it out more and more and more? And it gets worse the further you go. Now, the second time you and I played, I was playing the Americans, and your ambush site was the furthest hex away, up around here somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So by then, the column got completely strung out. It was unclear who has to stay behind. So now when the ambush happens, you're defending at 1 with Herkimer in the lead, just hanging out there. Maybe you've got 2 in the next one, 1 in the next one, 1 in the next one. It's a mess.
Yeah.
So it's almost mandatory. It's almost mandatory that you have to use the Herkimer relief column. Well, what does that mean? That means when the ambush does come, and it will come, or the attacker will get a positive 1 for the ambush and a positive 1 because you're using Herkimer relief column. Using regular march is almost not an option, because what it does to your line by the time you get midway through, you're a mess. And not only that, your army morale is destroyed.
Yeah, they make it tough on the army morale, and then they make it extra tough by writing poor rules and making you not want to use the regular movement because you can't figure them out.
Yeah, you can't figure out who has to tighten up the line, who has to stay behind.
Yeah, it makes no sense
to close the gap.
Yeah.
All of them, some of them.
Yeah. You're bound by the frustrating rules, and you're bound by the army round. Going now over to the units in the Fort Stand.
Yes, exactly.
Okay?
Here's another choice you're faced with in the very beginning of the game: how to set up your units because they're overstacked.
Okay, so what's the best stack for that? Here, I'm going to spread them out.
Right. There are some different options. I don't think any of them are really good.
What do you think? Give me the variations.
Okay, well, first of all, you can decide to split up your garrison artillery or not. So,
okay, let's look at my variation, where I split it up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I think
You split up your artillery, that's right.
Okay, and I believe I stuck him, there, and maybe there.
That's correct.
Okay, why? Well, if you separate the cannons, you actually get 3 steps,
Yep.
You get an extra step. The other thing is this, according to the rules, units inside Fort Stanwix only ignore retreat results. They may disrupt or shatter in place if there is at least one undisrupted non-artillery combat unit. Also in X, they ignore disrupt, which is important because if you disrupt out of here, you're going 1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can't have that. So you gotta have one undisrupted non-artillery combat unit also in the hex.
Right.
And the only one that can stack with them is this one unit. So these guys gotta sit there in Fort Stanwix. Otherwise, it can, I don't know if he can withstand it.
Right.
So he's sitting there with the gun and with the leader, right? And this is left with these guys to fend for themselves.
Yeah. Well, what happened in this case was the guys in the Hornworks, my guys ended up coming around here. I mean, not exactly like this, but basically it was something like this. Okay. And
at that point, what I should have done is this. Here's the difference. What I should have done is move him back and move him in. That's what I should have done at that point. But I didn't. I don't know why.
But the risk is not being able to retreat.
Oh, you're meat in here. You could lose your leader
your leader to a retreat result.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing goes bad. So you leave them in here, let's say. Oh, man, we don't want to. So you retreat, you get your cannon out of there because you see you're building up. The guy's building up around you. Here I am building. Okay, man, get the cannon out. Holy cripes. He's going to crush me. Right. So then you come in at him. Here I am. Oh, man, he's meat. He's doomed anyway.
So you've got the column marching along. They're using the relief column march so they don't suffer negative army morale.
You have 5 turns to take him out.
Yeah, but then they get ambushed.
Yes.
And then
they get ambushed.
Yeah, and they're militia. So they've got that going against them, and the ambush and everything else, and the rifle and what have you. I just see it very tough for the Americans. That combined with the fact that the rules are very unclear as to how you implement that. I think it works better as a solitaire game because you play the British. The Americans are kind of constrained to marching along, and you set up Fort Stanwix the best you can. You do your best as the British to take them out. So as a solitaire game, yes. As a head-to-head game, whoever's stuck playing the Americans, it's a tough battle. Okay, let's switch to the other game. So Newtown. I think this was a more engaging game than Oriskany. I think there's a chance for either side to win. In fact, the Indians look weak, but because of the fact that the Americans have to win by 9 victory points, the Indians can definitely, they have a chance. They can take, here's my point. The Indians can afford to take losses as long as they don't give too many victory points to the Americans and as long as the Americans don't take Newtown. That forces the Americans to be very aggressive. They have to march as quickly as possible. And more importantly, they have to bring their artillery to bear because the natives are potentially going to fail a resolve check against the artillery and will be forced to retreat. The Indians, in turn, they can take losses. They could do a fighting retreat, a slow withdrawal, staying in the woods because they get ferocity when they're in the woods, and slowly withdraw back to Newtown. I think also it's important to recognize the advantage of your British and the Mohawks because the British and the Mohawks, they can stand up to artillery better, so they're not going to be retreating willy-nilly.
What I would say about this game is a lot about the Indian sortie. You look at the Indian dice rolls. Okay, you got how the Indian sortie goes if you look at the turn record track.
Right.
Okay, turn 2, they got 10%. The next is 30%.
Right.
The next one is 50%. Point is, you should be out there by the 4th on average. Now, your artillery starts on turn 2. You're here.
Yeah.
He goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Here we are.
That's turn 2.
He's there. Turn 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Right.
Well, this is the turn these guys should sortie, right?
Yes,
on
hopefully.
average.
Yeah. But let's say you got one more turn. Okay. How far can you get?
So you could get initiative, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Still out of range.
So here's these guys should be able to move on average. Let's say you're red jacket. What, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, you want them at least on that side, just on the edge of that creek.
Where you really want them is in the woods.
Yeah, because of ferocity.
Get the ferocity. The stream will give you the same thing as the woods, but you have to have everybody behind. The wood gives you 100%. Not only that, but it gives you the plus on the attack, not only the defense. You need these guys in the woods here. When these guys come up, then you fight them in between the 2 hexes in here, like you did.
Yeah.
As opposed to what ends up happening, I hate to say it to my dudes, is you get your cannons up into the open area. Where you see all this?
Yeah.
All these open, no woods, see them?
Yeah.
Not even behind here, no ferocity. So the lines are fine. Now the swamp's bad. But the lines are fine. But the ferocity is where you want. That's when you want to be in the woods.
Yeah. So
you want to fight the battle here. Now, what ends up happening sometimes is that doesn't happen. So that's how Mark Miklos varies this game. Every game has a little vary at the beginning.
Yeah. And
this one's varied by that sortie.
Right.
That'll depend on the game. Are you fighting it are you pushing them? Then what ends up happening, and we'll look back in the first shot of the game, you take out my very best leader dude and my very best unit.
I know. Well, that was unfortunate, but...
Right where? Right there. Right in the woods.
Yeah.
Where you had gotten up there on the very first sortie roll. Or second.
So when I was playing the Indians, I got out on turn 2. Or turn 3. Sorry, turn 3.
You were all in the woods by the time I got up there. Turn 2, I'm back over here,
Yeah.
We already figured
and you're all backed up. You're clogged up because you've got
stuck
slopes
in
and everything
the swamp and the river.
Yeah.
Way different than fighting in the open.
Whereas when you played the Indians, you were not able to sortie, so I was able to bring everyone up.
Use those cannons like you're saying.
I had all my units massed along the breastworks.
Oh, yeah. Right, before I could even sortie out, which happened on the very last roll, turn 8.
Yeah.
As far as the viability of the scenario goes, I think it lies quite a bit on where you're going to fight the initial contact. In between the swamp and the river or up at the line.
What else you got?
Cards. How about if I pull some of these American cards?
Yeah, drag them to the middle.
Okay.
Like in the swamp area, if you will. Yeah.
Okay. So
I'm looking at these. Some of them look really good. Some of them, I think, are pointless.
Take one out, for instance.
Well, let me just say, when I played the Americans, I had Forced March. I found that to be pretty useless.
I had that when I could have surrounded your unit. You nullified that card.
Oh, okay, so there you go. It really depends on the situation.
Remember when Black Snake was, I could have surrounded him, I think, using it, and then you play a card to delete it?
Yeah.
I do believe. So, okay. How about another one? Let's see.
Marksman, I like that one. +2 die roll modifier to hit. So the cards are potentially valuable. So here's the question. As the American, you start with 1 momentum chit. Do you think it's worth it to spend that chit to get an extra card or not?
Okay, so your other choices. One thing you can't play a momentum chip on is a rifle or artillery fire. It's only close combat. Or you can use it for initiative or something. That could be helpful. I don't know if that's worth it. I'd rather use it on a reroll. I think I might have used it on initiative once in these games.
Well, when you were playing the Americans in Newtown, you spent your momentum to get an extra card. So, worth it or not?
The way the dice rolls are, I don't know. Sometimes it's a crapshoot when you're rolling. Because, okay, you roll a 1 and you go, okay, am I going to roll another 1? We'll have to look at the dice roll charts to see if I will roll another 1. I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe I will. If I look at it and I go, oh, crap, I will roll a 1. I better just get a card. Because the card's going to give you something. There's some of them you're not going to. That's that one with the fife and drums. I'd be like, dang, if I got that one. Or if you got canceled the effect of an enemy card and the enemy's got no card.
Well, so we each played the Americans. When you played them, you did use your momentum chip to buy a card. When I played, I decided to hang on to my momentum chip. So, and I think I would still do the same. I think it's more valuable to have the momentum than to have the card, in my opinion.
I would say they should have more opportunity for cards. They got all these cards and then, you get 1, 2. What the heck, man?
Okay, well, we're talking about die rolls. Let's close out this discussion by looking at die rolls. I made a comparison chart. I think we can start there. And you know what? If I'm able to, I will try and include this in the description of the video. So if you look at that, you look at the die rolls. Start with Oriskany. Each side rolled around 30. The Americans 31, the British 32 times. Some of those were neutralized, either neutralized by a reroll or they were just more of a game mechanic thing that were just neutral. If you're looking just at plain die rolls, if you look at the ranges 0 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, you would expect a distribution of 40, 30, 30. So for the Americans in Oriskany, it came out pretty close to that. But for the British, 50% of the die rolls were in the 7 to 9 category. That is clearly lopsided.
Are those raw die rolls?
Those are the raw die rolls. They're agnostic, irrespective of what they're for, whether they're for combat or not. But then look at the next row. How many of these die rolls were favorable? And you may ask, well, what do I mean by favorable? Well, if you look at the Newtown chart, and if you look to the right, I've got the damage column. The ones that are adverse to the attacker are marked in kind of a dark orange. The ones that are beneficial to the attacker are marked in a light green.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean by favorable or unfavorable as far as combat. And then as far as other results, if you win the initiative or if you pass a morale check, I consider that to be favorable, okay?
Okay.
So with that in mind, go back to the comparison. In Oriskany, the Americans got 40% favorable die rolls. Now, they only did 3 damage rolls. If you go further down, you see that the Americans only rolled 3 times for damage. So those favorable rolls were things like passing morale checks and winning the initiative and stuff like that. But 40%, so it was under average. The British got 60% favorable. But when we talk about whether the dice are smiling on you or not, generally we're not talking about the distribution, the raw distribution. I think what we think of when the dice are favoring us are the damage rolls. So let's look at the damage rolls. When you're rolling for damage, usually it's combat or rifle fire or artillery fire. The Americans in Oriskany rolled only 3 times. They got 1 out of 3. The British rolled 10 times. They got 80% favorable damage, and some of them were very favorable. If you keep going across that chart, then, in the first time we played Newtown, the Americans rolled 8 times for damage. They got 50% favorable. The British rolled 5 times, but they got 80% favorable. Then the second time we played Newtown, the Americans rolled 17 times for damage. They got almost 71%. The British rolled 5 times. They got 60%. I think that table, the bottom 2 rows, are really what we tend to be talking about when we're saying, are the dice favoring us or not? Statistically, I don't think it's anomalous because when you go back to the raw dice rolls, they're more or less, like in the first Newtown, they're more or less in line with what you would expect as far as raw dice rolls. But when you look at the damage rolls, I think there's a significant tale to tell. So the second Newtown, the Americans rolled 17 times and they got more than 70% favorable on the damage rolls. I think that's where the real story is told.
I'll tell you what, one thing. Lack of success in whatever it is game. I play, you play a lot of games. And sometimes when I'm looking at this and I go, man, it saps the fun out of games. When you're going, holy mackerel, 50% of the rolls are 0 through 3. It hurts the fun of the game when 57% of your rolls are 0 to 3.
But what made the difference for the British in that game was on the damage rolls, they got 80%. Even though they rolled really poorly, 0 through 3, they got 80%.
Yeah, the ones that matter.
And those are the ones that matter. And here's my final point. These games are less a simulation and more just a game, which depends on die rolls. And if the dice smile on you, then you're having a good day. And if they don't, you're having a bad day.
Yeah.
That's what I've got to say about that.
Great game.
Yeah, I'll give Newtown a thumbs up. I'm not so sure about Oriskany. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. This has been The Great Game.